Good evening, and welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families.
And I'm Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And we are excited to have you join us for the next 30 minutes as we talk about relationships. A huge shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to Maxwell Construction, Greendale Cinemas, Mansfield Insurance Agency, and Erie Insurance. We are so thankful for these businesses who have made this show possible. So whether you are listening live or online, Rock Solid Radio, helping to strengthen our community one family at a time on your hometown radio, Eagle Country 99.3. Good evening, Eagle Country. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. This is Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. Tonight, we have a show that has something for everyone.
I think everyone can relate.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless you're dealing with me, right?
Oh, dear.
Wait a minute. Yeah, tonight's show is, it's a little bit off the beaten path for us. We're going to talk more in generalities of dealing with difficult people.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that everyone will be interested in because we've all dealt with them.
Yeah, and whether it's in a marriage, the family, the workplace, your neighbor, meetings, whatever, at some point in time, you are going to run into difficult people.
Absolutely.
So tonight's show should be kind of interesting, but hopefully we can give you a few pointers, some tips to get through those situations, and looking forward to that conversation. But before we go any farther, Linda, you need to help us out with a thank you.
I just want to say thank you to our sponsors for helping make Rock Solid Radio possible. Thank you to Maxwell Construction and Greendale Cinemas, Mansfield Insurance Agency, and Erie Insurance. Without you, this program would not be possible. And hon, we've talked about before in our intros all the time that Rock Solid Radio is all about relationships, and not just marriage and family, but with anyone we come in contact with. So this is really a topic I think that hits a lot of folks.
Yeah. Well, and we need to just bring up a reminder of different things that we've got going on. Here we are into what I call summer, even though it's not official, but June is here. And June's a great month. Don't you agree, hon?
Oh, just because it's your birthday month?
And
Father's Day?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't say that, but since you did, I would agree with that.
I know where you were going with that.
Yeah. But this is a great time of year.
June 15th, by the way, if anybody wants to send gifts for you.
I'm not sure if we should have disclosed that. So anyway, great time of year. Lots of different things going on. And just for Rock Solid Families, we have a lot of things going on through the summer with, of course, just doing a lot of our kid activities, but also our finishing classes on a regular basis.
We can't stop working out just because it's summer.
No, in fact, all the more reason to try to make sure you get some kind of routine established. And so we would invite you folks out there to come join us Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. and Tuesday, Thursday at 6 p.m. and Saturdays at 9 a.m.
Yeah, all those teachers and cafeteria workers and aides and bus drivers, now that summer is here, instead of just sitting around, come and join us.
Yeah, try something different. Our exercise is called finishing, but it is a great combination of strength and cardio aerobic conditioning. And so along with that, it's kind of fun and crazy and we just have a good time there.
Well, and we do. We feel like it's almost like a little small group where we have prayer, we have devotion, we really challenge people when they're there of something to think about, something to take home, something to do, to change, to strengthen your walk with the Lord and your family. And so it's mind, body, and spirit in our minds.
Yeah. So also, I just want to. One of the things that you and I have been talking about lately, I mean, here we are in summer. We got weddings coming up and
graduation parties.
When I think about summer, I think about it's just a great time to make memories. Yeah. And so I would encourage all of our families
on that,
out
memories.
There to make some memories this summer, to take the family to some different places. You and I are talking about the trip possibly to D.C. this summer.
A lot of memories there.
Our kids are asking a lot of questions about this country and why we do this and that and the other. And you and I have spent quite a few hours in the D.C. area touring and everything. And so we want them to have that memory.
Our kids have never been there. And, Yeah, we definitely, us and about 10 million people will be there this summer.
So that's why we haven't locked on our date, because we're trying to get somewhat strategic on no weekends and maybe sometimes
no
through the middle of the week.
Crazy. But hon, why this topic? If you just joined us on Rock Solid Radio on Eagle Country, we're talking about difficult people, and I think this is a topic that everyone can relate to. I have a feeling this topic alone, this headline maybe attracted people to tune in, maybe for the first time. So, hon, why this topic of difficult people?
Let me start just so that we all understand the nature of difficult people, which, by the way, you should probably start by looking in the mirror.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to start with in 2 Timothy chapter 3. There's a little bit of a section here I'd like to read. This kind of tells us where the difficult people come from, okay?
Which, by the way, the title of this section is called Godlessness in the Last Days.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
It tells you a little bit.
It says, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents. Oh, we love that one, don't we? Ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying His power. Have nothing to do with such people.
Well, you wouldn't be around anybody then.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
So, I mean, that list, but that's kind of an encompassing list, but just take one of those characteristics, and if it's in yourself that particular day, whether I'm unloving or whether I'm rash or whether I'm abusive, that's enough to make me a difficult person that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so add a little bit of selfishness in that mix, and what we find is that we have been told and fair warned that there are difficult people out there. And so there are ways of kind of getting through those difficult people.
Sure.
And sometimes, I just have to be honest, and this is kind of just putting this right up front, sometimes there's just certain people you should avoid. If you don't quite feel like you have the skills, or you don't, you're not prepared, there are certain situations that are, for your sake, better to just avoid. And I think that's part of what that scripture is talking about. Don't have anything to do with those people if you know that it's not going to go well, it's not going to bring out the best of you or them.
But, hon, let's make it clear, and I tell couples this all the time when they're at odds or there's a lot of conflict. Your partner, your spouse, that difficult person is not the enemy. Satan is the enemy, and he uses whoever and whatever he can to divide and devour us. And so whether it be a boss, whether it be a child, whether it be a spouse, please remember that they are sinful just like you and I, and that we make mistakes, and that grace sometimes is a huge part of getting through that difficult person.
Yeah, we're all wired with personality traits. We were dealing with someone the other day, and she was a very nice lady, but she was very strong in her presence.
Yes.
And so even though I enjoyed speaking with her, I could tell, boy, she could be very confrontational very easily. She's somewhat headstrong is the word that we would maybe use to describe somebody like that. And I thought, this is a lady that you want on your side, because if you don't have her on your side, you're going to be constantly battling for.
But people need tools to be able to deal with folks like that. So.
Yeah, and so part of that is dealing with that person, but also getting that person to realize, am I headstrong like that?
Am I difficult?
Am I? And so being humble enough to say, where are some of my challenges that make me a difficult person?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Many years ago, I had someone that was very headstrong toward me.
It's not me, right?
Well,
okay.
And at work, and they told my boss, they told me that I was not the right person for my job in full-time ministry, and they felt like they had made a mistake. The church had made a mistake in hiring me, and that was very difficult. That person was very difficult to be around. because I knew how they felt. And, it was hard to hear those words. And I remember reflecting like, okay, what kind of validity is this? What kind of truthfulness is this? And I had to go and test everything against God's word. And I would really encourage, if people come at you with very strong words and maybe hurtful words, that you kind of discern, is there any truth to it? And so I had to separate him also from the words.
Right.
I couldn't. Was it said in anger? Was it in jealousy? What was it? And so I had to really evaluate that and not take it to heart. And it was hard because I definitely did for a while. And I realized that I couldn't hang on to those words. Actually, it ended up motivating me.
Yeah.
And so if you have a difficult person, just realize that, there might be a little bit of hint of truth in there somewhere.
Yeah. And, I want to just briefly share a story about when I was a difficult person. Remember the time we took our son, Zach, and it was close to his graduation. I forget exactly what it was, but we went to a restaurant up in Oxford, and we ate, or we ordered, and it took forever to get. I think it was your meal.
It was.
You
were more upset about it than I was.
I got very upset because we're all sitting around eating, and your meal still doesn't come. It still doesn't come. We're, hey, what's going on? And finally, it gets to the point where we have all completed our meal.
Yeah.
We've sat around, and there's still no meal.
Yeah.
And when they finally said, "Sir, it'll be a few more minutes," or whatever, I was like, "Are you serious?"
We're all done.
Yeah, and so at that point, I was a difficult person.
Yeah.
I felt justified in my difficulty.
You were angry.
But the interesting thing was, how. Because we all can be justified in our anger, right? I mean, we can. That's easy enough to do. I'll rationalize that. And so how is somebody going to deal with me? And the manager, I felt like he had an opportunity there to really kind of jump in and kind of save the situation. And he was very indifferent about it. Like, well, this is just the way it is, sir.
And it made you angry.
And it made me even more angry because, it was just not handled correctly. It didn't help to bring me down. And I'm not going to say the name of the restaurant here, but I won't go back there.
Right.
And
it didn't help to de-escalate.
Yeah. And so I was the difficult person, and I felt justified in that. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I know that there would have been better ways for him to help de-escalate me.
I have a feeling managerial training deals with that a lot.
Yeah.
And there was a season in my life that I was not a happy camper at work, and I was a bit of a grumbler. It was a very
No.
It was a tough time in ministry, and there was a lot of pressure coming in from all sides, and I was a very difficult person to be around. And I will never forget, a friend invited me to lunch, and she spoke, the truth and love to me that day. So that's another great thing to remember, even with difficult people, that, you can help a person by speaking the truth in love, but do it with gentleness and respect, like my friend did. You can't control their words and actions, but I can control our reaction.
So, I'm really listening here on what you're saying. So what was her approach to you?
Yeah.
And did she call you out on kind of the attitude or whatever, the grumbling?
She did it in a loving way. She did it in a private way. That's important. If she didn't throw me under the bus, she didn't call me out in front of people. But I think she heard some bitterness in my voice, in my tone, in my approach to things over a period of time. And she knew that wasn't me. She knew that was not what I would want to reflect. And so when she spoke to me, she started with some positives and what she loved about me, but then she went on to talk about what she's seeing and what's wrong and how she could help. And I so appreciate, I still remember that. We were at La Rose's in Harrison, and I still remember her just speaking that truth to me. And it really was an eye-opener to me, like, that's the way I'm coming across.
Right.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and to be able to say just what you just said there, that's not the kind of person I want to be. And to be real enough to say, I was out of my lane there. I was out of bounds, and rather than to be so self-righteous that you could not by any means be wrong.
Right. And and we know kids can be very difficult. We have several in our home, and this summer will be a challenge. But as adults, that's where we show maturity. You know, Ephesians 4:15 says, instead, speak the truth in love. We will all grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. I mean, that's where we show maturity, where we own it and where we acknowledge it, and when we confront it in a godly way if there is something that needs to be handled.
Yeah. So, all right, so there are difficult people out there. We can be difficult people, all right? So how do we go about these situations of dealing with difficulties with people? And so, you know, Matthew 5:43 through 45 just talks about that whole idea of, man, this is so hard to swallow. Love your enemy.
Yeah, love those difficult people.
Yeah, love. And so that whole idea of taking a deep breath, stepping back and going, you know what? I don't know what that person's going through.
Right.
I don't know the challenges from everything from their genetics to their upbringing to their current situation. I don't know all those things, but I know that I am as flawed as they are.
Yeah.
And so having that similarity, that commonality of we're all flawed.
Yep.
So how can I love that person? So that is kind of a foundational thing. All right. That doesn't mean you're going to instantly go to that, but when you take a deep breath and learn to put yourself in a little bit of a timeout, like I probably at that restaurant that I was talking about, maybe I should have stepped back and said, you know, maybe they are completely short on help.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, I mean, I and looking at it from another perspective would have allowed me to be a little bit more loving, probably.
Right. Speaking of love, we have done a lot of work with love and respect. We've talked about it before. Dr. Emerson Eggridge writes this book. And in this book, he tells this story, which, Hun, I think so illustrates what you're talking about. He says there was a bus of 40 people who intended to travel all night to Texas, and the bus did not leave right away since the driver was waiting for 4 more. And finally, those 4 arrived. It was a dad and 3 kids. And as the bus takes off, the father sits in front, and he just stares out the window. And the kids are running up and down the aisles. The dad's just ignoring them. And, you know, I can imagine me being in that bus just starting to fume, you know, like, come on, Dad, like, get your act together, do something with these kids. How could this dad be so permissive and uncaring with these kids being so disruptive and disrespectful? And so in anger, maybe you tap the dad on the shoulder and tell him to have the kids sit down. And the father turns around and looks at you and says, oh, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. We just came from the hospital and my wife and their mother just died. And then he looks out the window again. And so all of a sudden your emotions go from anger and disgust on this dad not being a dad to empathy for what he just went through. And so, you know, we got to acknowledge that we don't know, like you said, the emotion that's going on inside. Or maybe an illness that, you know, pain they're dealing with. I can't imagine being in chronic pain like some people are. Yeah. How hard that is.
You know, so what is some good advice? You know, well, in my years of working through the school, I had to sit in countless hundreds of thousands of parent meetings.
Hundreds of thousands.
I mean, millions. Let's just take it to the limit. Millions and millions and millions. And, you know, I always, there were certain meetings that you knew were going to be challenging before you even walked in. I mean, you'd look at your schedule and you go, oh, I've got this coming up this week. So you know it's going to be challenging. And so, as I got older, especially if it was a teacher who was maybe somewhat newer in their career, and they'd be nervous about that meeting and dealing with that parent, I would say, well, first off, remember, we're talking about their child.
Right.
We're talking about their kid. And so the very first thing that, you know, you can do is to try to realize, well, what is the emotional attachment that this person that you're saying is a difficult person to deal with? What's the emotional difficulty that is going to be up in this meeting? And why are they emotionally attached to it? And I mean, we have found you attached parents and kids together on a problem like in school, your logic a lot of times can go right out the window. Because
emotion, especially mom.
And so to go into those kind of meetings, those circumstances, understanding, okay, wait a minute, I'm not going to be combative. I'm going to first try to feel the emotion that's out there. What are they bringing? And then start to listen. Okay. And simple things like, again, not being defensive, but asking them right off the get-go, okay, well, what can we do to help?
Sure.
I always have found this with whether I'm working with kids or adults or whatever. If you tell somebody to do something, well, here's what we need to do right here. Just that tone will put a person, especially if they're already emotionally charged, it'll put them in defensive mode, and it'll be, and their brain kind of says, "Don't tell me what to do."
Right.
But if you say, "How can I help?" or "Would you be willing to help?" That using that whole phrase of helping, people generally want to help and make things go better.
Yeah, and when I was in the seminary, we were studying the counseling world. One of the first things we were taught is you've got to walk into a room with unconditional positive regard. You have to be willing to treat that person unconditionally, positively, even if they're coming back at you. Because, let's face it, in the counseling world, they're coming in with struggles.
Yeah, they didn't come in to say hi.
Yeah, exactly. Their world isn't great right now. And so the unconditional positive regard sets it up for success, even in those difficult people and those difficult situations.
Yeah.
So.
The idea, too, and we're kind of trained in this just because of coming through the counseling world, but that active listening.
Right.
If you come in with your agenda hard into the encounter, the meeting with this difficult person that you're calling difficult.
It could be your spouse, a child.
Right. If you're coming in and you're not actively paying attention to them, if your focus is in on your thought and your emotion, and you're not looking at them, looking at their eyes, looking at their posture, looking at the tone, of their voice, you have to actively listen to the person that you're working with, and the messages will flow.
Sure.
I mean, and they're telling you without saying a word a ton of different things. Whenever I went into a meeting with especially usually it would be a dad. Moms might come into a meeting and be very forceful and strong and cry, but a dad that had his arms folded and was staring down. My thought was, oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something's up.
So we had to untap that and figure out so that we could slowly kind of release him, so that we can stay in logic, so that we can stay in calmness.
Yeah, and sometimes a difficult person is difficult because their words and their actions and their attitudes aren't matching. So they might say they're fine or everything's okay, but they're saying it in a tone like something is not up. And so to kind of dig a little deeper and just say, is everything okay? Are you sure something's not up? Have I done something wrong?
Yeah.
Just to acknowledge, hey, it doesn't sound like things are good right now. Yeah. And if they do come at you, let's say it just unleashes the beast, then you got to decide, okay, am I going to tackle this, or am I going to maybe give a timeout to step back and say, well, maybe it's not the right time to talk about it. Maybe we can set up another time when you're calmed down,
Yeah, or that whole understanding how they're dealing with the emotion in time.
Yes.
So like, okay, maybe we need a little time out. Maybe we need to take a breather.
Yeah,
and
space.
all of us go through that. I've been in meetings before where people have been screaming mad and laughing within seconds of each other, and so some people sort of cycle through those emotions quickly. Others, they get angry and they can hold on to that forever. So it just depends on who the person is, but giving them the time to go through the emotions. Also giving yourself that time. I've sat in meetings before where I was either, somebody was directing something towards me, and once they said something, as my phrase would be like, that sat in my craw. I was a little upset with that. And so to understand how you're handling that is really important.
Yeah, and you can't, you got to detach yourself from the emotion if you're going to have any kind of resolution, especially if this is your spouse, if they're upset and they're saying, I need a moment, or I can't talk about this right now, do not chase them down.
Yeah.
I had that happen in a couple, and she ended up putting a weight through a door, a dumbbell through a door. Because
better the door than him,
exactly,
right?
because he wouldn't open the door. And he was basically realizing she's a difficult person right now. She is really high on emotion, and the last thing we need to do is try to talk right now.
Yeah.
So you got to give some space.
Yeah. The other thing is, when you're dealing with that difficult person, sometimes there's just a cynical side of us that kind of wants to bait them to even bring them along, like to rile them up even more. And so we do that by certain remarks or gestures that we'll do, an eye rolling, or we'll say something just a tad bit sarcastic just to see where they go with that.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, being a professional or being really interested in resolution,
right.
we have to step away from that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you swallow that, even if you're not quite believing what they're selling. Right. You're stepping back and going, what's I just need to keep this in because I have a destination further out that I'd like to get to, which is resolution.
And you've said before, hon, you can't rationalize with an irrational person. You've told me that before if I've been in the heat of an argument with somebody. And so you do have to, don't sweat it. You need to, if you have to disagree, maybe you have to kind of separate the person from the situation and allow that time to resolve some of it. Good eye contact, good body posture, says, I want to engage with you. I want to resolve if they're willing to do that, but they might not.
Mm-hmm. And it's, now this is not, we want to make sure that we're clear. When you're dealing with a difficult person, that does not mean you cave in. Sure. That does not mean you just roll over and give them what they want.
Abuse at all.
No. In fact, we stick to the truth.
Yeah.
We stick to facts. They may not be able, because of the emotion, may not be able to sort of swallow that fact or the truth on that, and so that's where they could get a little bit fired up. Okay, so that's where we back off. And so, we were in a heavy discussion the other day with a couple, and there were some facts that we were putting out there, and right away they were jumping back with attacks of, but what about this? What about this? And it's like, okay, we're not going to go there right now.
And so if it doesn't go well, if you can't seem to resolve the situation with this difficult person, get some mediation. The Bible says that you go to that person. Matthew 18 says to go to that person. And if that doesn't work, then to bring one other person with you. And so that might have to happen to be able to get. And that's where Rock Solid Families comes in. We have dealt with a lot of couples, mother, father, daughter, son, things like that. So we're there to help.
Yeah. A couple of different things here. Just always agree on the things that you do agree on, okay? Some things you just are going to be distant on. Other things, hey, if we can agree on some things, let's agree to these. The idea of owning your part of what maybe was negative.
Huge. Even if it's 5%.
Yeah, even if it's just a little bit, I admit this is where I messed up here. Okay?
But don't say, hey, I'm going to own my 5%, but you're 95% wrong. You can't use the percent with them. Just own it and then stop. Don't justify, don't rationalize.
I know that I messed up here and state where you messed up.
Yeah.
One thing that's real, when we get into a situation where we know we have a hot battle going on, is to set some boundaries right off the get-go.
Love boundaries.
Set some boundaries. Hey, we know there's a lot of emotion around today. We're not going to be arguing. We're not going to be yelling. We're going to be respectful. Set those up. And if those can't happen, we'll stop the meeting and allow.
No name calling.
Yeah. So set those boundaries up.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Well, that's a lot of stuff to run through.
But we could be here all day with this.
Yeah, that is great stuff. The first thing is take a deep breath and look at what you need to own. Own your part of it. And rather than always trying to fix or change the other person, they're going to have to come to their change through their own heart and processing of the situation.
And we'd say every time when we're working with a couple, you cannot control their actions or attitude or their words, but you can control your response.
Yeah.
Your response, as Emerson Eggridge would say, is your responsibility. Your response is your responsibility. So don't say, you made me angry, okay? Anger was a choice that you made.
I was angry.
Angry.
Yeah. All right. So your homework, your challenge for this week is, take a look at some of your difficult situations, your difficult people that are out there. Step back for a second and think about, okay, what is the goal here? What resolution? The goal is not for you to be right. The goal is for you to get resolution. And so that needs to be defined.
And they are not the enemy, remember. Satan is wanting to use them, those difficult people, to get to you. And so don't allow him to win.
Yeah. Well, hey, There you go.
Yeah.
We wrapped up all the difficult people and put them all in one bag. We're all good to go now. We need to close out. So as we close out, we want to thank again Maxwell Construction, Greendale Cinemas, Mansfield Insurance Agency, and Erie Insurance. Thank you all for another great evening. We pray for your family. We pray that you have a great week. Good night.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. For help or more information about what you've heard this evening, contact us at rocksolidfamilies.org or call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. Again, a huge thanks to our sponsors, Maxwell Construction, Greendale Cinemas, Mansfield Insurance Agency, and Erie Insurance. If you have questions you'd like answered on air, or you want to chime in on something you've heard this evening, go to our Facebook page, Rock Solid Families. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tune in next Sunday evening at 7:30 for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, and for my husband Merrill and I, thanks for tuning in to your hometown radio, Eagle Country 99.3.